Well, hey, welcome to the Highlands podcast. We have a special episode today. We are going to be answering lots of relationship questions.
Ooh, hard.
Marriage, family, dating, friendships, all kinds of things. We actually recently went through a relationship series here at the Highlands.
Yeah, that's good.
You kicked it off with a message on selfishness.
Yep.
We looked at little foxes that spoil the vine from Song of Solomon. And then we had Pastor Dan Broyles with us who talked about forgiveness and boundaries. We talked about bitterness, isolation, and a lot of questions came up. 21 questions. So are you ready?
This is going to be a long podcast.
It's going to be we're going to set a record today. I feel it, but we're going to get through all these questions, as many as we can. But we want to thank you for sending questions in through social media, through email, through the atrium, just lots of questions everywhere. But I can't wait to jump in. So we're going to go by kind of, the biggest group of questions was about marriage. So we're going to kind of jump in there first.
Okay.
And you and I are going to kind of go back and forth and just
Let's
hopefully help some people and answer these
this.
questions.
The very first question is, what is one relationship lesson you wish you learned 20 years earlier?
This is a hard question because you and I have only been married for 10. So
That's right. I've got some wisdom on that.
I'm also like a little offended at this question because it's like, man, like back in the 50s, Pastor Jeremy, like what did you know? I'm like, I'm not that old, but I guess 20 years ago I was in my 20s. I was thinking about this question because 20 years ago I actually was married.
Yes.
Previously.
Yes.
And our church knows my story. And I was thinking about some lessons. This isn't going to help anybody, but I feel like the best things I've learned about marriage was going through a divorce. So that doesn't really help.
I benefited.
That's why people are like, wait, I have to go through a divorce to learn about marriage. That's not exactly what I'm saying.
Well, hopefully they can hear from us and not have to go through that.
Exactly. I think one lesson that we've been sharing with our girls, our daughters, of like really trying to reinforce is I think, at least for me, I think I got married too young. And I think a lot of, the environment, the church environment that I grew up in, it was like you wanted to be pure and not have sex before marriage, so you just needed to get married kind of right away.
Yeah.
Which I understand purity is being the goal, but I don't know if that's like the only thing. And so we've talked to our girls about, not getting married super young. We know couples who've got married at 18, 19, early 20s, and it's worked. But sometimes when you get married so young, you don't really know who you are, what you're looking for in a spouse, and even the maturity to move forward. And so I don't think there's like a specific age to I'm not saying like don't get married. I did try to convince the girls to not get married until they were 35, but that didn't.
I don't think that's happening.
They whittled me down.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a specific age. I think it really is prayer. It's fasting.
Yeah.
And it's because you're not just trying to stay pure before marriage. You're actually trying to set up a long-lasting, beautiful marriage.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea of like you're trying to be right before God in purity, but also understand that there's a balance to like understanding, down the road.
And I think, like you said, you don't always know yourself.
Exactly.
A lot of times it's helpful to lean into, you and I have talked about, future spouses for our girls and what would fit their personality. Sometimes we don't really see that. And I think that there are people around us that see in us things that can give us wisdom and advice.
Yeah.
They can notice red flags for us. So there's that too.
I think that's too. And this probably doesn't help people who are already married. And I think it's helpful for our kids and grandkids and those that we have influence over. But even for those who are married, I think one other thing I can say is, and I know this sounds very trite and simple, but it's so true, is keeping Jesus at the center.
Oh, yeah.
I think sometimes we kind of get our focus on our own things. We're going to talk about those. Some of the questions came in through that. But sometimes we get so focused on our own things that it's like, if I keep Jesus at the center of my life and you keep Jesus at the center of your life, then Jesus will be center of our marriage.
Yeah.
And that's so helpful moving forward. So
it's
I love that
necessary.
question.
Yeah, it's good.
It's fun to look back as well. Number 2, and this is an interesting question. What's something people assume about pastors' marriages or families that isn't actually true?
Well, obviously we're perfect.
Yeah.
That's just
you are, I'm not.
That's just not true at all. In reality, I actually think we have a really good, healthy marriage. But just like anyone, we have struggles. I know I have insecurities. But I think for the two of us, we work really hard at our marriage so that it can be healthy. I think that sometimes people think, well, he's just so incredible. They hear my husband preach. Maybe they hear me preach a time or two and they think that I've got it together. We don't. We work really hard. And I think that the two of us have at different times put out warning flags. Hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
Something doesn't feel right. And then we work towards it.
Yeah.
We work towards making sure that our marriage is healthy. So I think that's an important thing for all marriages.
Yeah.
And I don't idolize anybody's marriage. You might see the most perfect pictures online. You might think that everything is roses, but everybody works at having a healthy marriage. That's across the board, no matter what you have.
I love that. And I think on the family part of, even with our girls, I think parents, sometimes we unload what we're thinking and feeling about everything. So let's take the church, for example. I think we've really tried to protect our girls of not sharing like the dirty, the ugly part of church or the world or our lives, and not sheltering them in a way where they just don't think anything is going wrong. But it's just, I don't want to talk about somebody that I'm frustrated with to them, because it's not helpful when they see them at church or in the community or whatever. So I think protecting our girls as well from, hey, church is the best place you can be. Like,
Absolutely.
we serve. Like, when the girls were younger, they were serving with you in kids ministry, and they were always around serving in church, and it's just been really good.
I would say that extends on into our marriage.
Sure.
I want my girls to think that their dad is the best dad in the whole wide world, and you extend that respect to me. And I think that that's important. Sometimes in marriages, we want to let our kids know and get people on our side, and actually that's not the point.
Yeah.
That's not how to have a healthy marriage. So that extends into a lot of things.
Yeah, that's good. I love
that. My question for you is, what do you do when you love someone deeply, but they keep making destructive choices?
Yeah, this was we're going to read a lot of honest, transparent, vulnerable questions, and this is one of them. And, we slotted this under marriage, but this also could be true with dating or friendships, or even family. And I think there's probably different answers for both. So let's kind of talk about non-marriage relationships first. So if someone is hurting you deeply, making destructive choices, then and they're family, then you should keep some distance, but keep praying. Because ultimately, we're responsible for our own life and soul.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we allow, well, they're family, well, they're this or whatever, and we allow kind of toxicity to creep into our life while we're trying to be a brother, be a sister to them.
And often into our family,
Exactly.
With our kids and things
sure.
like that. That's
for
not
sure.
right.
You and I have talked before where maybe there was some past friendships that I had that you're like, I don't know if I want the girls to kind of be around that or see that or
true.
normalize those behaviors. And that's been helpful for me.
That's true.
I think in a family, non-marriage relationship, it's, hey, we pray, we love, but we're going to keep a distance. I think if it's a friendship, or especially dating, this is the time where you need to just break it off and be separate. But let's kind of focus in on marriage. I think when people are making destructive choices, we tend to try to be the Holy Spirit. We tend to try to fix them, or if I can just say this, or if I can just do this, if I can just guilt them here or shame them there, that I think we are thinking that we're actually trying to take over for the Holy Spirit. And I really think these are those hard seasons of desperation. But I really think it's really when you lean into, I'm going to give my spouse to the Lord, and I'm going to do what I can to encourage them, help them from making those decisions. But ultimately, I have to let the Holy Spirit guide.
Yeah.
And I would say too, and we're going to probably say this a lot, there might be moments, there probably will be a lot of moments where you need to seek help. Whether it's a spiritual counselor here at church,
That's good.
whether it's a professional therapist. But there are moments that we can't handle on our own. We do need help. And this might be one of those.
That's really good. I love that.
What about this one? This is interesting. We talk about trust. Trust is such a huge part. And the question that we brought was, how do you repair trust in a relationship after it's been broken? And again, this works in different settings. So trust in marriage, trust in family, friendships.
Yeah.
And then they ask an interesting question that I know you have some thoughts on. Is trust always rebuildable?
Yeah. Well, so there's a lot of different perspectives to look at here. If we're talking about you are the person that broke trust, let me address it that way. If you're the person that broke trust, you need to do everything that you can to prove the opposite. So, and there's a lot of ways we can break trust in marriage relationship. Maybe it's, I lied, maybe it's I cheated, it can go the gamut. But if you are being dishonest, if somebody can't trust you, then you need to you need to open up. You and I have each other's passwords for everything. At any moment, we can grab each other's phones, and we often do. And I don't feel stressed. And, you know, if you grab my phone, we don't usually do it because we're checking up on each other. But there's nothing that is that you can't see.
Exactly.
I extend that to our girls.
Exactly.
They have all of our passwords. We're not great at passwords.
I know.
We have a couple of passwords that we use for everything, so our girls know everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're in a friendship and there's a struggle, you need to go over and beyond. Whatever it is that you did to break the trust, you need to do the opposite. Okay. Now, I will say, especially in a marriage relationship, I don't always believe that the trust can be repaired. I think if there was cheating, and honestly, I mean, I think you want to do everything that you can to repair that trust. But I think that's the reason that we are given an out in the Bible to say, you know, if there is adultery that takes place, that is the only reason that you can divorce somebody. And the reason for that is because I know that the Lord knows us. And sometimes those things, that brokenness cannot be repaired. So in that case, if you find, because you can't have a marriage that, you know, we can't forgive each other, we can't love each other, we can't trust each other. So if that's the case, I do think that that is the one reason that there is an out. In any other instance, you got to work hard to repair that trust.
It feels like when trust crumbles, like the marriage is going to fall apart. And I admire couples who adultery has come in and they try to make things work. And there are some success stories, but it is an uphill climb. Because you really, so you and I, you mentioned, like, you know, if you're on social media or like our phones, like I'm not worried about, you know, a hidden email or hidden account or whatever, and same vice versa. But when trust has been broken, particularly in the cases of adultery, you're always wondering, like, man, like, why are they home late from work again? Or why do they kind of have their phone this way? Why is it always over here? Why is... What's going on? Why did they go to bed much later than I did? Like, so you're always kind of in the back of your mind wondering. And I think a healthy marriage is when you're not wondering.
Yeah, true.
And I think when trust is broken, particularly in the cases of adultery, and I think that's why Jesus made an allowance. God said, hey, there's very, very, very few exceptions, but here's one. I think that's why, because trust is extremely hard to rebuild.
And in reality, you don't want to live with anger against each other because that actually puts tension on you. If one can't forgive the other, there's tension in the marriage, and then oftentimes that can lead to bitterness.
But let me give hope. I think there's really no quick way to build trust. I think the best way to build trust is through openness. So that's just being completely open with everything. Yeah. And so if you're not in the habit of your husband, your wife knowing the passwords, or your kids, like you said, have access, that's a great first step of like, hey, I just want everyone to know, here's my phone password, here's my social media, here's my email. Like, you have access to everything.
And you won't realize the burden that having secretive nature has had on you until you completely let that go. And there's so much freedom in that. So
it's like we always told our girls growing up, don't be shady.
Don't be shady.
Don't be shady.
That's a family motto. People may not know, but that's real.
We've said that like a million times. And it is that thought of like, the more open you are, and that's just 1 John, as he is in the light, we walk in the light as he's in the light. And I think the more we walk in the light, the more open we are, the greater trust we'll be able to build.
Let's go to our next question. It says, I work really hard to discover the needs of my bride and how she's wanting to be served. I know she's the daughter of the king before she's my bride. However, her desire to contribute to the emotional health of our marriage is very different than mine. How can I continue to build our relationship when it feels like I'm the only one contributing? I feel very lonely in our marriage and don't know what to do.
Yeah, this is a hard question. It's an honest question. It's a transparent question. To me, though, it's also a frustrating question. And I don't know who wrote this. Obviously, it was a husband. And so can I just say to my brother in Christ, like, I understand where you're coming from, but there's a lot of selfishness in this question. And I say that because there's a lot of, he's kind of setting himself up as like, I'm the best husband in the world and my wife sucks. Yeah. And I just don't think that's a great place to be in. And another thing that's kind of in this question that is a huge danger to marriage is comparison. Where we compare, like, because, you know, well, I'm contributing and she's not. Man, the minute we start saying that, like, our marriage is in danger. Because men and women are different. Like, we all contribute differently to the marriage. And so for the wife to think that her contributions are greater than the husband's, or for the husband to think that his is much more important than the wife, you're already on some dangerous. So in this question, and again, I appreciate the question, but he kind of is thinking that the wife is the problem. But I would actually say, bro, like I would start with you, because I think you might be the problem. And I feel like now there's a few layers to this question that we won't take a lot of time. And by the way, if you are the one who wrote this question, I'd love to chat with you, meet with you, because there's a lot of layers to this that we won't be able to answer all through this podcast. But understanding your contributions are different than your wife's. You don't always know what she's doing or going through, or saying behind the scenes, or helping to contribute to the marriage. And you're probably not the only one building the marriage. Like you do a lot of things that I either don't see or don't recognize, but that doesn't mean that, well, man, look at all the stuff I'm doing and Aimee doesn't do anything. Like, it's not fair to do. That's why Paul tells us when you compare, you're unwise. Yeah. And I think that, and now the last thing he says, I'm feeling very lonely. And so that's something definitely that I would reach out to a counselor for. Yeah. I would go to a men's Bible study, get a group of guys, reach out to somebody, because we don't want you to feel lonely. But at the same time, I'm wondering if some of these things are kind of this like spiritual haughtiness that says, well, I know she's the daughter of the king, but I'm the best thing ever. I just would be very careful. And that might not be the tone of the question. Yeah. That's kind of how I read into it. But I would encourage you, if you're feeling lonely, if you don't know what to do, the next thing is to seek some help. But even start thinking about what is she doing to contribute to the marriage. Yeah,
I would also include love languages. Yeah. Sometimes, I am loving you the way that I like to be loved, but actually, treat others the way you want to be treated. It actually goes deeper in marriage. In marriage, it's actually treat them how they want to be treated. Yeah. So sometimes we're emotionally covering them the way that we want to be emotionally covered, but we haven't considered that, they feel loved when we're saying things, or they feel loved when we're doing things for them. Yeah. There's different ways to be loved, physical affection. So am I delving into how she wants to be loved? But even beyond that, if you are loving your spouse perfectly, I want to encourage you, we are as husbands to love as Christ loved the church, and the church isn't perfect, but Christ is perfect. That's right. So even when the church fails, even when your wife fails, we are to continue to persevere and to love the way that Christ loved the church. That is
a good thought, and maybe a next step for this husband is Google five love languages. There's an easy test to take, because that might be another. It's just like he has for example, one of your love languages is physical touch. That is not one of my love languages, and so me hugging you like fills your cup. Like, that's amazing.
It does.
You hugging me, I'm like, this is nice, but I love hugging. Anyway, why am I getting onto that topic?
But you love hugging me.
But if you hug me every day, I'm like, yes, I know she loves me. But if I go every day, you're like, oh my gosh, like my husband is in love with me.
But it even extends to me, and that is, you work towards that. But then I let you know if I need a little bit more physical affection, and we kind of work together that way to even just tell each other our needs the best we can.
That's good.
I love that.
All right, for the next one, for couples preparing for marriage. So this is interesting because they haven't yet made that covenant. Yep. We believe strongly marriages are covenants. So once that covenant is made, that marriage is established, like there's not a lot of wiggle room in what you're able to do. But before you come to that step, what are some practical and spiritual habits those couples should build now to create that lifelong covenant before God?
Yeah. I think there's something that's really simple, and it's something that my mom talked to me about, but it's even in the Christian world today, we allow ourselves to look at this famous person, this person. We let our eyes wander, even when we're in relationships. I would actually encourage you, if you're a single person, stop looking at everybody and noticing this person looks good, this person looks good, this person looks good, because you think suddenly you're going to be in a committed relationship, you're going to be in a marriage, and now your eyes aren't going to look at those things anymore when you've actually trained them to do that. I think that's something I don't want to look at and find other men to be sexy. Right. You're the only person for me. You're the only one I want to look at. Yeah. And it's because of those habits I established before we were married. And then I'll talk to people that it's the opposite. They're putting posters of famous people in their rooms. And again, that is just going to extend into your marriage, and you think it's not going to be damaging, but it is very, very damaging.
Yeah, one pastor calls that your standard of beauty. So who you marry, that's your standard of beauty.
Absolutely.
So So guys, like your wife is your standard of beauty. You don't look at models or other places. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But it's this idea that God gave you your husband, your wife, and that is what you like.
Yeah.
I would also just maybe practically say,
Yeah.
we talked about this a lot. You talked about this in your relationship message on selfishness. I think if you're wanting to practice to get ready for marriage, then you need to start serving, like start figuring out ways, because the more we
good.
serve, the less
Yeah.
selfish we are. And so I think that's another part, but also establishing some spiritual like practices now. So if you don't have a regular time for devotions, establish that before you get married. If
Yeah.
you don't pray regularly, establish that now before you get married. Because when you get
And
married,
you're talking about individually. Yeah.
because everything kind of just when you get married, it's like it's just a new world, and
Yeah.
you're coming together. And if you did things right, and you're not living together, and
Yeah.
you're kind of establishing one household from
Yeah.
two, and you're just having to do a lot of different things. And so you should hopefully have some spiritual disciplines in your life already.
Yeah.
That would just continue to carry through.
And as you're a couple, if the two of you don't go to church,
Yeah.
that's a problem.
That's
you
true.
know, if
Yeah.
they're a Christian,
Right.
but I attend church, they don't.
Yeah.
That's already going to be a red flag, and you need to pump the brakes. That's not going to be a good relationship for you.
Yeah. That's good.
Let's see. The next question is, what are the biggest spiritual and emotional threats to marriage, and how can couples guard against them? Ooh, that's deep.
I know. I was thinking about this one, and I think there's a phrase that couples allow to creep into their life that is applicable to a lot of scenarios, and it's the phrase, "It's not that big of a deal."
Ooh.
So I think sometimes, like for example, let's take a husband or wife at work, and they're innocently flirting with somebody. Well, it's just not that big of a deal. Like I didn't do anything, but what we're doing is we're giving. I think it's Paul talks about giving room to the devil, like footholds, and
Yeah.
that he can kind of creep in. And I feel like if you're saying it's not that big of a deal, you might need to pause and be like, whoa, this actually could be a big deal in my life.
Yeah.
And I kind of think emotionally, spiritually, physically, we make room for things that are culturally normal.
Yep.
But spiritually should be red flags going off with huge buzzers. Because I think we make allowances that the world says, but we don't want to live like the world. We want to live different. And that's why Jesus says, hey, this road is narrow.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I would caution couples. If you're thinking it's not that big of a deal, like for example, well, I told my wife I'd be home at 6. I get home at 7:30. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
You just broke some trust. And
Did.
well, we promised our kids that we're going to take them to this place, but we'll do it next week. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is we're really hurting our relationships.
Yeah.
Anything that you would add?
I completely agree with that. Let your yes be yes.
Yeah.
Let your no be no. We talked about trust being foundational to marriage, so I do think that you have to keep those things, and you have to guard against anything that you're not keeping your word.
You and I talked about, I brought you up on stage for a sermon illustration when we were talking about bitterness, and one of my favorite marriage illustrations is the idea that there's 3 stages of marriage. There's face-to-face, that's intimacy, that's dates, that's sexual intimacy. Like those are close times. Then there's shoulder-to-shoulder. That is work, that's life, that's taking the kids to school and practices and running errands and all the stuff. But then there's back-to-back when we're fighting. And we try to minimize as much time in back-to-back stage as possible. But we also talked about sometimes there's life hits, or we start to maybe drift, and then we can feel like not husband and wife, but just roommates.
Yeah.
So this next question is from a couple or from a husband and wife, I'm not sure, but they said, how can we get our relationship back if we are just roommates?
Yeah, that's so good. So I think it's really interesting how oftentimes our marriages can actually reflect our relationship with our Heavenly Father. And, Scripture talks about that. The Scriptures tell us to turn back to our first love. And I think when we first fall in love with Jesus, we're just so excited, we're passionate, we want to serve Him.
Yeah.
But over time, we begin to just be, well, that's God, that's my Lord and Savior, He's there for me. And we just kind of start forgetting about the goodness of the Lord.
That's good.
Like how excited we were when we first received salvation, first understood what that covenant meant.
Yeah.
And I would say it's the same in our marriage relationships.
Yeah.
I think that it is easy. When we first get married, we're so passionate about each other. We want to serve one another. We want to just like, that dating stage was so fun. And we have this high, but then it becomes like old news and we're not excited about it anymore. And I think we have to go back to the things that we were doing originally.
Yeah.
Even if, my spouse is not doing those things, I'm going to think of how can I serve my spouse, because I want to, with serving, just like we serve the Lord, we're showing our love.
Yeah, that's good.
We're going back to that time when we were first dating. So what are the things that I did for you that you loved, that I'm like, hey, maybe I'm giving my spouse a massage because I know that they love it.
Yeah.
I'm spending time with them. I'm doing nice little things. Honestly, give yourself time alone to be like, what can I do for my spouse? Let yourself imagine some great things that you can do. And even if they're not doing those things, you're going to start to find the joy. You're going to start to find the love. And you're going to just, with those actions, you're going to find how much you're going back to those early days.
I love that. That's so good. That's so good. Well, we have a couple of questions about family that we want to dig into, so why don't you start?
The first is, how do you honor your parents as an adult when they are controlling, critical, and emotionally draining? That's hard.
This is so hard because the Bible does say honor your parents, and it does not give an age limit.
Yep.
However, I do think it says children obey your parents, and I think there's a difference between honor and obedience.
Yes.
I don't think a 45-year-old man, well, that's almost me, I'm 44, I'm always supposed to obey my parents because now I have my own kids, my wife, but I should always honor them.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's the way we view things, and maybe this person really does have controlling, critical, and emotionally draining parents.
Yeah.
And I think for that, similar to what we talked about earlier, you honor them, you don't disrespect them, you don't curse them out, dishonor them in any way. I think that'd be unbiblical. But I also do think that there might be moments where you do need to maybe keep a distance.
I agree. Have some boundaries that are healthy.
Exactly. And especially if you have kids and now it's their grandparents, that maybe you're like, I don't know if I want my grandkids around. And maybe it is that having a frank conversation with your parents of like, hey, I know I want you to see your grandkids, but here's a couple of problems I have.
Yeah.
I think it all goes back to how willing are you to biblically, lovingly, graciously confronting your parents and having a conversation. And if there's no kids involved, it makes it a little bit easier because it's just maybe you and your parents. But when you have a wife or a husband and when you have kids, those become your first responsibilities over your parents.
Yeah.
And it's hard for parents. We're not at that stage yet, but hard for parents to let go.
Yeah.
Because we always remember them as our baby girls and like baby boys. But I love, Pastor one time said that when our kids get married, they're not adding to our family, they're creating a new family.
Absolutely.
And it's this thought that sometimes we're like, I gained a daughter, I gained a son. It's like, well, not really. Like, they gained a family. And so we need to let them go. So I would say if there are any controlling, critical, or emotionally draining parents listening to this, that you just need to let go.
I agree.
I know it's hard. It's going to be hard for us.
Yeah.
But we don't want to keep them to us. We need to let them go.
Yeah.
We need to let
and
go.
Scripture warns against causing problems in marriages.
True.
And so if you are a parent out there and you are causing, well, maybe you don't like your daughter-in-law, you don't like your son-in-law, but if you're causing problems regardless of that, that would put pressure on their marriage, that is sin.
That's right.
That is absolute sin.
Yeah.
The Bible tells us that parents are to set up for their children.
Yeah.
That means they don't belong to us.
That's
We're
right.
actually supposed to help launch them
Right.
out.
Right.
It also tells us that the husband and wife are to leave their father and mother and cleave unto one another. So I would just encourage parents, as your kids get to adults, the joy is launching them out, not holding them back, because that's very destructive for you, and it's definitely destructive for them and for their futures. But if that's you, and you do need to draw those lines, sometimes you maybe need to have some distance, but we still want to honor and love. So what are the good things that we can do?
Yeah.
The Bible tells us to love our enemies, to do good to those that hurt you. So what are good things that you can do for them while maybe possibly removing yourself from a situation that's toxic?
I'm really thinking about this a lot because our oldest is in college.
Yeah.
She's 18. She's an adult. Of like, what does that look like? And I know our relationship is going to morph with her. And I read an article recently that says parents with adult kids, you you have to transition from being from a director to into life of like, here's what you do this, and this, to now a consultant. Like, so it's like, you're not telling them what to do. You're offering advice if they ask.
Yeah.
And I understand from a parent perspective, like, oh my gosh, I understand, because when they say controlling, critical, emotionally draining, in some weird way, I actually see a parent that really cares. They care about this adult child, but it comes across too much. Yeah. And so the parent needs to back off a little bit, but the adult son, the adult daughter does need to still honor, but in a loving biblical way.
I agree.
You mentioned in-laws, so that's our second question. What do we do? I should answer this question. Just kidding. What do we do when my in-laws have been cruel to me?
Yeah.
I have great in-laws. I should say that. Pastors Ken and Terry.
We both have great in-laws.
Awesome.
Yes. Here's my encouragement to you. I think oftentimes we can allow the hurtful words to just let it, roll off my back. We're not ducks, with water going off of our back. Those things hit us in the heart. And I think the hardest thing to sometimes do is actually in the moment address it in a loving way. Yeah. So when somebody says something that's hurtful to you, maybe a mother-in-law doesn't like your cooking or doesn't think you're parenting well, I actually think it's okay to stop and say, what do you mean by that? Yeah. That's a very hurtful thing to say. And I think sometimes that will take somebody aback because they don't expect you to address the cruel thing that they just did. Now, in reality, when we say cruel things, me, you, all of us included, we actually have guilt. So your in-laws saying rude things to you is actually giving them guilt. So some of us can relieve that guilt in our in-laws and in other people when we're willing to address those things. And really just to say, we don't have to be cruel. We don't have to spit back, well, you're a jerk. We can, in a loving way, address that. And even if they're still cruel in that response, we have said, I'm not going to tolerate this kind of behavior. If we need to draw that line, I'm not going to be around you if you're not going to talk kindly to me. And we just sometimes have to draw the line. We do need to get our spouse involved and talk about what are our boundaries, what is allowed, what isn't allowed. You have to talk about family values because we're all raised in different family environments. But I think that it's really important to address it.
We're going to switch categories in a moment, but I just want to quickly say, I think a helpful question to ask, because we talked about controlling, critical, emotionally draining parents, cruel in-laws. I think a helpful question to ask is why. Why are they acting that way? Sometimes we just get so focused on, they were mean to me, they were controlling, they were critical of me, but it's like, well, why was, perhaps that in-law was cruel to you because they're just desperately missing their son or their daughter. And they're seeing you as the son-in-law or the daughter-in-law as someone who took away their child. And so, again, I'm not excusing the cruel behavior, but sometimes it's helpful to kind of dig into, like, well, I wonder why my parents are so critical or controlling. I wonder why my in-laws are so cruel. Am I honoring my in-laws? Am I honoring them in a way that I'm not trying to divide this family, but I'm trying to, understand maybe some of the family dynamics? And I think it's helpful to understand why some people are answering me this way or asking me this or telling me that. Yeah. Now, the theme of family is going to be woven throughout some of the following questions, but I want to switch to dating. Let's talk about some dating questions.
The first question is, how do you know when you've truly released a past relationship versus just learned how to function without it? That's good.
That's a good question. And I think it's different for everybody. I would say probably one of the ways is when you stop thinking about them. If you can go 24 hours without thinking about that person, I think you're on a good path. The reality is, though, it depends on what the relationship was. For example, if you had sex before marriage and you bonded yourself to that person, it's going to take you harder to get over than if you didn't sleep together. If you were a Christian and they weren't, or you became saved, and there's just a lot of different variables in it that I think. However, I would say, do not get into a new relationship without moving on from your past relationship.
I agree.
That's completely unfair to the new girlfriend or boyfriend. But it's going to be really giving it over to God, of just helping him to almost do some sort of like mind swipe to get rid of some things. But the reality is, and this is why sin creeps in and is entangling our life, the more sin you committed in that relationship, I think the harder it is going to be kind of, because that's why Jesus says, hey, when you get married, you're leaving your family, you're cleaving to each other.
Yeah.
And we've talked about divorce, but that's why divorce is so painful, because you're actually unbreaking, or you're breaking apart something that was never supposed to be broken. Yeah. And it's the same with sex. When you have sex with each other outside of marriage, you're actually bonding yourself to someone who you haven't committed to or have made covenanted with. And so it actually is harder to get over that relationship.
And I also, one of the things you told me, whether it's a dating relationship or a past divorce, moving on into a next relationship, did you have time to reflect on what are your negative contributions to the past relationship? If your answer to any relationship was, I was perfect, they were not, and that was the problem, you're not ready to move on to the next. Because we all, in relationships, contribute negative things.
Oh, of course.
So if you're ready to kind of deal with that and what can I not drag in that's negative into the next relationship, I think that's going to be really important.
And if you can't share anything you learned from that last relationship, you shouldn't get into the next one.
I agree.
Because sometimes we just carry our problems into the next relationship, hoping that girl or that guy will fix the brokenness from the last relationship, and we're just compounding our problems. And let me just say, it is okay to be single. We're going to talk about that, actually, the next question in a moment. It's okay to be single for a season or for a time, and even if you don't feel like God's calling you to a life of singleness, it's okay to have a moment or a season, because you need to diagnose or dissect, what did I do? And maybe you were the more innocent person in the relationship, but you still brought problems to it. So let's talk about that for a moment, because the next question was for people who are single, and this is for people who don't feel God's calling to be single forever.
Yeah.
So for people who are single longer than they expected, how do you deal with loneliness without believing something is wrong with you? It's a good question.
Yeah. Boy, that is a good question. So I actually didn't really start dating until I met you, and I was 30. And so oftentimes we can begin to think, what's wrong with me? I'm seeing everybody around me getting married. But I would encourage that stops being the focus. In that period of time, God was teaching me to trust in and to rely on Him, and to not put all my hopes and dreams in having a great relationship, in being married. That actually, by the way, that period of time, I'm grateful that I had that, because it helped me to have a better marriage relationship.
That's good.
I think sometimes that's the negative about getting married younger. I'm not against getting married younger, but sometimes we have these really romantic ideas of this person's going to complete me. That's like the worst line in any movie ever, because people don't complete you. God does. And that's way too much of an expectation to put on somebody else. So in the period of singleness, of loneliness, lean into God. I got to a place where I said, all right, God, it seems like maybe you're not bringing the person. I'm not willing to lower my standards. This is, where I'm at. So if that person doesn't come, then I am good with just me and you for the rest of my life.
That's good.
And I feel like I was in a really healthy place. And that's when God brought you. And I'm not saying you want to get there so that God brings the person. I think that you want to get there because you want your relationship with God to be like that.
That's good.
The next question is, how do you know when it's time to create distance in a relationship instead of trying harder to fix it?
Yeah. We put this under dating, but if this is in marriage, just because you feel separate isn't a reason to get divorced. So you just have to.
Grass isn't greener on the other side.
Exactly. You got to just that's the danger of divorce, is that everyone thinks that's the answer, and it actually is just going to compound your problems, especially when kids are involved. But let's take this as someone who's just dating. If you are already thinking about distance and how to fix things, I don't think this is the relationship that's for you.
I agree with that.
I'm not suggesting that every dating relationship should just be easy until you get married, but if you're already thinking about outs and ways to then I just think that you just need to be honest with yourself and with that relationship and just kind of move on. I think that's why dating should we've talked about. I think dating, sometimes we rush dating too.
We do.
We had a conversation, multiple conversations about dating. Because for me, I was, coming out of a divorce, but I was like, man, I don't want to make the same mistakes. And so I think I told you, let's date for 2 years. And you were like, I'm out of here.
You said, let's date for 2 years and then talk about marriage.
Yeah, I was going slow.
Don't make yourself sound reasonable.
But I do believe couples should go through at least a cycle of the
Yeah.
year to,
Yeah.
to see how is your family
agree.
at Christmas time?
Yeah.
What are you like when you're stressed at work? Like, what do you do during the summer? Like, what do you do when the weather changes? Like, there's so many different things to kind of see how the other
You shouldn't
person.
even consider marrying somebody unless you've seen them deal with anger.
Exactly.
Because it is important that they don't get
Yes.
physical during
Yes.
anger,
Yeah.
that they don't shut you out if they're angry. There's
Yeah.
so many things
Yeah.
to handling and dealing with people for a whole year
I
that you
agree.
get to see.
Yeah, I love that. So I feel like if you're already thinking about creating distance, then you just probably
Yeah.
need to move on. However, I think there might be some moments that you're like committed to this person and you really can see yourself marrying
Yeah.
them that you just maybe need to dig in. I'm not suggesting that when
Right.
life gets hard, you just run,
Yeah.
but you need to think about, all right, am I going to really dig in because this is the person that God has for me
Yeah.
for my life? If that's the case, then you just dig in and you, again, maybe you find help, you find a counselor.
I think you can't see marriage and dating as the same.
Yeah.
Marriage is a covenant relationship. There's no out on that.
Right.
You do everything and anything to make sure that that marriage is happening. Dating is not the same.
That's good.
Dating is in mind, we might make that covenant, but at any point we can say, hey, this is not working out. For me, dating should be the most fun time of
Yeah.
your life because you're trying to woo one
Yeah.
another.
Yeah.
And so if it is the most difficult relationship you have, it may not be one that you should, it's only going to get harder as you get married. If you can't even have fun in the dating stage, that is definitely concerning. Now, in any relationship, things are going to pop up, and I think that that's where you want to have counselors, not the girl that's just going to say,
Right.
oh my gosh, how could he?
Yeah.
But somebody who has wisdom, who can help you. There was a point that you and I were dating, just to be completely honest, and I'm like, does he love me? and my sister is very wise. She has a good relationship with her husband, and I had a conversation with her, and she said, actually, this is this is the way girls are built. This is the way men are built. So it doesn't sound like he doesn't love you.
Yeah.
And it really opened up conversations between the two of us that really helped our relationship because we had a good relationship. But, red flags, we want to definitely check on those. But make sure you have counselors and don't stick it out because you've begun treating your dating relationship like a marriage relationship.
Right, that's good. How about this one? What does a healthy relationship look like before God?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think that a healthy relationship, we care more about the other person than we care about ourselves, but I care more that you love the Lord, that everything that I'm doing is to encourage you to love God, to have a deep, abiding relationship with Him. I'm making room for that. I'm not, we each of us have devotion time in the morning, and I'm not trying to come over and get your attention at that time because that's the most important. And then I think that a healthy relationship is that I am constantly thinking of ways to serve you, as we were talking about. You're thinking of how to honor me because that's kind of the way that we function. We're considering each other above ourselves. We don't get into comparison.
Right.
That's easy. If I'm sitting there washing the dishes, that what is he doing?
Yeah.
Well, he's done a lot of other things.
Right.
And so just do everything you can to serve and don't worry about what it is that they're bringing to the relationship. I think that's going to be a healthier place to be. If you get into comparison, you're only going to see yourself as the best because you're going to see your best qualities and you're not going to measure your worst qualities against their best qualities. So
I think healthy relationships are also sexually pure.
Oh,
Sometimes we
absolutely.
are asking God to bless our life and we're just living in sin.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Like, honestly, we've had, can you pray for me that God would bless me with a baby? And it's like, well, what are you living? What's your living situation? Well, it's me and my boyfriend. I'm like, I don't think God's going to bless that. And you're asking God to bless your sin. And so I'd be careful about living together before you're married, having sex before you're married, because that's not a healthy relationship.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And the reason why it's not this old puritanical, sense of purity, it's a sense that because marriage is a covenant, that when you begin having sex before marriage, living together, you are giving yourselves outs before the covenant. And all those things should be done in covenant. And so now you're just conditioning your mind to think, when it gets hard, I'm out.
Yep.
And it's like, well, but when you are starting to do these things, you're actually saying before God and each other, I'm committed to you for the rest of my life. Yeah. How about the next question?
How do we know if our constant differences with our partner are pushing us towards growth or if it's showing that it's not the person that God has for us?
Yeah, I think when you're dating, or maybe probably even before you start dating, you should have some non-negotiables as far as, I want them, like you mentioned, I want them to love Jesus, and I want them to, I'm not talking about like shallow stuff, like they need to be 6'6", or they need to have this color hair. Like, I'm talking about like really core, could I see this person as the mother of my child? Could I see this person as a father to kid? Do I think he's going to be a good dad?
Yeah.
How's he treating his parents? How is she treating her mom or her dad? Like, what does that look like? And I think that there are some non-negotiables that are in our life that if that's just not happening, then I think trust is a big thing. If you can't trust that person, or if they lie, even little white lies that we'd say, like those are red flags that you might need to say, okay, this is just too many.
Yeah.
You know, I just think there's those moments that we have to be honest of saying, I can't, you know, and you know, maybe it's even you have kids and now you're dating someone with kids, but they treat your kids terribly. Like, that's another red flag that you need to be honest with yourself about. And sometimes we allow loneliness to be the fear that moves everything. I don't want to be lonely. I'll be in an abusive relationship, but I just don't be lonely. It's like, but loneliness is not this boogie monster that you're trying to avoid. Like, sometimes that's better than the current situation that you're in.
Yeah.
And so I think it's understanding, like, here are some non-negotiables that I have for what I'm looking for. And if they don't meet that, like, then I do need to move on.
And I would say, in regards to just somebody tearing you down and growth, you helped me to grow. I mean, you and I talk about that a lot. But sometimes when we say things that are, hey, maybe that wasn't the best, maybe you shouldn't have said something this way, you've helped me to even argue better, because I thought, from the start that yelling was the way to do it and just get your point across.
That's my legacy, helping Aimee argue better.
You actually have. And so you have helped me. And I would say that oftentimes those things at first can kind of sting, because we always think we're right. But at the end of the day, as I evaluate, it's, you weren't trying to tear me down. You were actually trying, and I can look back and say, I'm such a better person because I've known you, because you've helped me to grow. Now, conversely, somebody tearing you down, you're going to feel raw. You're going to begin to feel insecure. And so those are the differences, I would say, between growth and destructive. If you are so insecure and, that they may be gaslighting you, where they're just trying to get you to depend upon them. Right. Their comments should actually be helping you to be strong, so that you can stand before the Lord. They should be caring. They should be loving. They should be about wholeness, even if they're hard things. Because, you've had to say some hard things to me, and I probably have said some hard things to you, but it's really in love. So I would say that would be a difference there.
We're going to move into friendships, but our last question, and I'll just kind of answer it quickly so we move on. If we've kind of touched on this question, it's, how do you let go of the future that you thought you'd have?
Yeah.
And I think it is not living in fear, that no one's going to love you, or you're going to be lonely the rest of your life, or you're going to be all alone. I think it really is trusting God, of saying, God, I trust that you have a good plan for me. You have a prosperous plan for me. And while I don't see it right now, I'm going to believe that you are guiding me every step of the way.
Yeah.
Usually God does things different than we would have done ourselves. But understanding that God's plan is always better than your plan. So don't force anything. Let's move to friendships. And let's talk about, we're wrapping up. And again, some of these cross dating, or we might touch on marriage, family in a moment, but let's talk about friendships.
So what does a healthy Christian friendship actually look like, and how do you know when a friendship has become unhealthy or one-sided? Yeah,
and again, this is a little bit dangerous ground for us to be walking on, because sometimes it's hard, because there are unhealthy and there is one-sided friendships, but sometimes there's also comparison. So sometimes it's like, well, I always text them, or I always ask if they want to go out to dinner or go watch a game or whatever it is. And so I think it's being careful about comparison. Yeah. But sometimes, there are people that are overly dependent on us, that we're like, oh man, like every time they text, they want something. Yeah. Every time we get together, they'll always ask me for something. And you need to avoid that. Like you probably need to distance yourself from that. And then sometimes there are people that it's just a one-sided thing. Like, for example, I'm more introverted. I don't have, the way I read somewhere that it was kind of visualized was, it's kind of like those surge protectors. They only have a certain number of like inputs, like that you could put plugs in. So maybe it's like 6 or 8. that's me. I don't have this unlimited like surge protector with all these. Our youngest daughter, it's unlimited for her. She loves it. For me, I'm like, man, I don't even know if I have 6 or 8. I might have I have you and the girls, like maybe room for one here and there, but I don't have a lot of like
we're a lot.
inputs. And so, but I think it's just understanding like that person that you are friends with, they might not have the same relational capacity that you do.
True.
So it's not that they're like, gaslighting you or they're burdening you. You just have to understand who they are.
Yeah. I would also ask a question. Is this just a season?
Yeah, true.
So maybe you have a lot of fun with a friend, but all of a sudden there was a death in their family and now they're a bummer.
Yeah.
But I think that's okay. Even in marriage relationships, it's okay to say, hey, this is a season where maybe I'm carrying it a little bit more. But that's the question. Is this just a season? They just went through a divorce and they just need me to listen and they just need to cry? Because we don't want to necessarily not be friends in the hard time, because hard times don't last forever. So that would be the question to ask yourself, is this a season? Because we continue to want to love and support our friends even when they're going through hard times. Is it possible to love someone deeply and still decide they shouldn't be in your life anymore? What does that look like biblically?
This is one of those questions where you need more information. And so I would encourage this person who asked to really seek out a pastor or a spiritual counselor. Yeah. Because, I mean, again, what does this look like as far as you love someone deeply, but now they shouldn't be in your life? Like, I think biblically, some general principles would be anybody that is drawing you away from the Lord, you need to remove and move on from. So if there's a spiritual drain on you, then I think you need to make some hard decisions. I think if it's somebody who is toxic in your life or a bad influence maybe on you or your family or those that are around you, I think that's another reason that you need to remove them. But I would take those decisions. I wouldn't take those decisions lightly. I would really pray over them, and I would seek some counsel of, hey, here's our history. Here's what's happening. What do you recommend that I do moving forward? But that's a hard situation. Yeah. Any advice or extra things?
I think you're completely right on that. It is something that we want to. Yeah. And I would also say use your Bible. What does the Bible show you? We can take our relationship struggles and we can actually put them in categories and see how did they handle those right, and we can also see how they were handled wrong scripturally.
We saw a good model friendship with Jonathan and David in the Old Testament. Solomon writes, "Iron sharpens iron," and I think that it's those if that relationship or that friendship is sharpening you, then I think that's good. But it just always kind of being aware of what that might look like. How about this question? How should Christians navigate friendships and relationships with people who believe very differently than they do?
That's good.
We see this all the time now,
We do.
particularly politics.
We do. I actually think that it's good that you have friends that don't believe the way that you believe, because we actually as Christians are called to reach out to tell people about the Bible, about Jesus, the good news. So if you don't have any friends that are believers, that might be a problem. The question I would ask is this friendship, is this relationship pulling you away from Christ? Yeah. Are you allowing that? Is it something where the only time you see that friend is in a bar and you go get drunk? Well, that might actually not be healthy for you. You're not being a good testimony to this person. So are you still able to talk about Jesus? Are you still able to live your life the way that he has called you to live it before this person? If you absolutely, this is pulling you away from Jesus, I do think that's the line that you need to say, okay, this may not be a good relationship for me. But other than that, I would encourage you, pursue that, pray for that person, continue to encourage them to join you for church. That's a great opportunity. It's the mission field, so.
Yeah, and I think our society right now is so divisive, and you're almost not allowed to be friends with somebody who believes differently. Like, how many times have we seen social media posts of random people of, I'm not going to family Thanksgiving because they voted this way, and you're just like, really, you're gonna
delete me if you believe like this.
Exactly, and you're like, man, and we kind of are being encouraged in our culture now to live in echo chambers where we only surround ourselves with people that we believe in. Yeah. You and I, whenever there's maybe like a presidential election, we actually try to watch all the different news sites.
Yeah, we do.
I don't want to just watch CNN or Fox News or MSNBC. I want to watch different viewpoints because it kind of helps me like understand not just things that I believe or think are right, but actually understanding maybe a broader view. And that's politically, but even in, racially, generationally, whatever that looks like, of just understanding. I think that we should be different from the world. And that means that we can. That's why I love Sundays. We have a diverse church, a lot of different backgrounds, political beliefs, lots of different ideas and perspectives. But I think it's a place that we can gather together under the banner of Jesus. And I think as a Christian, that is your true north, your navigational point of like, I'm going to follow Jesus first, and God's going to bring people my way. And I love what you said of if you're not surrounded by people who believe differently than you, you're probably not doing things right.
I agree.
Last question.
Last question is, what are some accountability tools you would recommend for men struggling with porn in ways to not only deal with the strongholds, but also mature their relationship with Christ?
Man, we're going to end our podcast with porn. This is a huge stumbling block for men, and not just men, also women. Mm-hmm. I would say a few resources to help guys practically is there's a book called Every Man's Battle. Mm-hmm. I think it's called Every Woman's Battle as well. It's by an author named Stephen Arterburn. Even if you're not struggling with porn, I would recommend every man, every boy going through puberty, like young adult, to read this book because it really lays out some of the struggles and some of the ways that the enemy will try to trip men up visually. Every Man's Battle. I think we talked about devices. I think that our kids should have access to our phones. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anything that we are looking at. I don't think should be hidden photos, locked things away from family, from our spouses. But if you're still struggling with devices, there's a software called Covenant Eyes you can put on it. It actually creates an accountability partner. They can see what you're looking at. That's like a next level accountability. But I would start with, hey, giving it to your wife, giving it to your kids. Like, you guys have access to my phone at any time. I just want you to check up. And if you want to play a game, I'm not going to freak out or panic about that. And then there's one, I led a young adults Bible study some time ago, and I had some young adults kind of asking me about this. And there's a course. It's by John Bevere. He's pastor in Colorado. It's free on his Messenger X platform called Porn Free. And I've actually known quite a few young adults who've gone through that, and that has helped them tremendously. That's awesome. The point is, get help. Get help.
Absolutely.
I don't think you can break this without somebody helping you. I
agree.
And it doesn't mean that you need to post on social media or tell everybody, but find an accountability partner, a trusted friend, a pastor, someone to say, hey, can you text me? Or I'm going to give you my login information. I'm going to connect you with Covenant Eyes. So can you help me? But it is worth the fight. It is worth the fight.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you for sharing so many different questions. Lots of different questions. This has been so fun. I think we're set a record for the longest podcast we've recorded, but so fun. Thank you for joining us for this special bonus episode of the Highlands podcast. We'll get back to a regularly scheduled programming with our gospel studies, going through the book of Mark with our Next Gen team. I can't wait to hear that series. Thanks for joining us. If this helped you, make sure you let somebody know, share it with somebody, like, subscribe, do all of the things that we can to get the word out. We want to get God's word out into as many people's hearts and lives as we can. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Highlands podcast.